Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Roar podcast. This is a well-being podcast, and it's to inspire you to create a life and live a life that you absolutely love. Here at Roar, we care deeply about people's physical, emotional, spiritual, and mental well-being. So, this is really about you absolutely living your best life. Too many of us walk this tightrope between pressure to perform and, fighting fatigue from not prioritizing our well-being. So, we literally work through our burnout and we sacrifice our work and our life because, we want to get ahead in our careers. Literally there is another way and it starts with you. It starts with the resilient you. I am your host, Marilise de Villiers-Passon, and this is episode number 7 for 2024. And today I'm welcoming David Lancefield. Hi, David. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Marilise. Wonderful to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for joining. And so to just give you a little bit of background about David, I mean, many accolades, but more really his heart, which made me invite him. But yeah, David is a catalyst, a strategist, and a coach for CEOs, C-suite executives, and founders at the world's top organizations. David founded Strategy Shift a few years ago, and he now works really very closely with leaders, and he has worked with more than 50 CEOs, hundreds of executives, over nearly 30 years, and writes about strategy, leadership, and culture in various publications, to name a few: Forbes, Harvard Business Review, Strategy in Business, and the list goes on. I think what I love the most about David is really his curiosity, his creativity, his courage. He mixes intellect with intuition, reflection with action, and compassion with clarity. David also has a very powerful personal story that we're going to hear a little bit more about today. So I'd love to dive right into Strategy Shift and the organization you started. What's your vision and your inspiration about Strategy Shift?
Well, thanks for the kind introduction. Thank you. So I'd been working obviously under my own brand, but I wanted to create a vehicle, a platform, not only for my own work, but for work of other people, where we would tackle, if you like, the biggest, the most complex, the hairiest of problems facing leaders. The ones whether they're awake at night for good or bad, shifts that they want to make in the organization, their leadership team themselves, and make conscious decisions, choices, which is where strategy comes in, that really have an impact not only in the immediate, but also in the coming months, years, and their legacy. So Strategy Shift is me signaling an intent to work with, the biggest, the best, and also the most, I guess, open-minded of people who are willing to have a go and do some proper work.
Yes, beautiful, beautiful, and I love the shift, and also there is actually a movie that I love, Wayne Dyer movie, which is The Shift, and it's also his very spiritual journey, and I think what you're alluding to for me is the fact that people who are open-minded, who are curious, who want to lean into more, we are all meant for more. And we are going to really invite that possibility into our lives. But of course, we know that does not come without the challenges. So I would love to know why what's David's story? I normally take people right back to a transformational moment in their lives. Typically, it's a shift. And it's a moment where you kind of say, enough is enough. And really where you sort of take a stance for something or someone.
I guess the one thing about a shift, before I mention that, is some people come into the work and think, "Oh, I need to get into my inner being, playing the inner game, understand myself." They start there, and of course, that's always part of the work. Others have never done it. Right? They may be very successful, of a good age, good vintage, but actually, and so actually, it's quite frightening. So actually the work often is on real things they can do day to day, but then slowly over time increase the degree of introspection, reflection, and then, as you said at the beginning, marry okay, how am I feeling? What am I thinking? What should I actually do to test it?
Yeah.
I mean, my own story, I'm not sure whether there's some dramatic moment. I mean, I could easily say, oh, well, it was my son getting brain damage when he was a baby was a dramatic moment, and it was and still has lasting effects for him and my family. I guess that paused my professional self for a period of time and made me ask very big questions about what matters. And my job did matter. It still does. At the same time, when you're dealing with something that's a massive shock and not something that immediately sort of recovers or recovers quickly, when you have brain damage as a person, unless you're lucky, it lasts for the rest of your life if you survive. So that really, I guess, put a pause to make me think about what matters, who matters, and how I could work. I also was getting at that stage, that was 2012, I guess different itches. I wanted to scratch various itches, if you like, in terms of thinking, what about this? So I was, as you do in my previous role, running relatively large programs of work, but I was most intrigued with getting into the sort of, the minds of the people. So yes, we were running big projects, but actually, what are they thinking, feeling? What are their hopes, fears? And how do you connect that with large scale impact? And it'd be unfair to say that wasn't really, important in the role, but you didn't really need to go that deep. And so for me, over time, I took a coaching qualification. I then wanted to get really into sort of a closer bond with the big hitters, the big decision makers, as well as then helping them affect change. So personal shock, emerging interests, and then also thinking, look, I've been in a job for quite a while, much of it very good, thinking there's a big wide world out there. And I guess I started expanding my own network of people who frankly didn't describe me by my title or role or organization. They actually wanted to get to know me, which may come as a shock and a surprise and a laugh for some people. And I thought, hang on, I'm still relatively young. What else can I go for? And that started the journey of then transitioning out of that role in 2020. So these are long games, these shifts. Sometimes there's immediate things you have to deal with, but often the career shifts, the life shifts, they take, years to affect.
Yeah. I really love how you're presencing that because, we live in such an instant gratification culture. And so, myself, who has kind of been this accidental entrepreneur, I wouldn't say mine was a very strategic shift. Mine was kind of one out of desperation and out of a corporate role where I was completely on my knees, burnt out. Initially because of the bully, I thought, but then I realized I was my own biggest bully, which was also a very transformational experience for me. But that journey has been, beautiful, like evolution, beautiful discovery for 8+ years now. And, in your own capacity as a business owner, as an entrepreneur. And I think that inner journey is, I always say it's the hardest work that you'll ever do.
I agree. And I think there's the inner work, and then there's how do you make sure it doesn't become too self-reflective, too self-absorbed, at least for me. Whether you have time on your hands, whether you like doing that work, after a while, my view is you have to sort of get on and do stuff, talk to people, experiment, change.
Yes.
And so for me, the hardest part is actually getting the balance right between just going off and doing stuff and saying, hey, I've got an idea I've got for a new product service, people want to work with, things I want to write about. This is also just stopping yourself occasionally and asking, how does that sit with me? How am I doing? Writing a note to yourself, whatever the particular thing that works for you. And I do all of those sorts of things in the moment, just as a pause. And then also I have a group of people around me who are different to me in lots of different ways, background styles, etc., who can either proactively call me out on stuff where you think, get over yourself, or also when I reach out to them, can give me candid, constructive, and often quite creative ideas without telling me what to do, which I like.
Yes, That's beautiful. And I think that also is about really surrounding yourself with the right people. And yeah, and I think that the combination between, as you say, the the wants and the needs, but then also the inspired action, the aligned inspired action, is so crucial, is so important. I think the curriculum I'm sort of personally leaning into at the moment is around, it doesn't have to be hard work. I think, growing up in a big four firm, culturally it felt like it was always that kind of this grafting, working long hours, the fittest will survive. And so I'm really now, and it's not necessarily habits that die easily, it's like, you
Yeah,
take
tell me.
those habits into your afterlife. And then I guess it's about actually recognizing that that's not necessarily the right way, and then leaning into a better way, and then a way with ease and more flow. And so that's an interesting journey that I've been on. Would you say that's how you've also been experiencing it?
Yes, I mean, I think that's a beautiful articulation. I think there's also giving yourself permission to do the things you enjoy, do the things you're good at, and ultimately, of course, do things that people value, whatever value
Yeah.
means, not just money.
Yes.
And that's often
Yeah.
quite a difficult marriage. But at the same time, it's sort of, I think we all come, whether it is because of our institutional baggage, our own history. I think we often put constraints around ourselves. I can't do that, or that won't work, or a person like me shouldn't or should do this. Sometimes that can help, but often you have to sort of take the shackles off and then say, okay,
Yeah.
so what am I really good at? What does the market, people value? And where can I really stand out? And often it's the simplest of questions that, again, if you literally take a notepad, digital or old school, and write some of those answers down, often you can look
Yeah.
at it and think, oh, actually, I'm on the right path. Let's just get on and do it. Stop overthinking it, get on and do it. Or actually, I've been, doing some work in that area. I've been getting a lot of requests, but I've never thought I could do it because perhaps I should give it a go. So simple questions, actually answer them, and then just go for it. And I think at the same time, don't beat yourself up. I've had things that I thought, well, whether it was what we call a product or an idea, what I thought was frankly brilliant at the time, uh, and then you think it doesn't take off. And then other things
Mm.
which I thought were blindingly obvious, without being arrogant, people are like, oh, I've never thought about that before in that way. Okay, you then have to stop yourself and say, okay, so listen to what people are telling you and actually then do anything about it, rather than that, I know they must like it, but they don't really know. I'll carry on pushing something that's really clever. Well, you could do that, but doing something that's clever that nobody wants, it can be a frustrating and unfulfilling journey doing that.
Yeah, and I think that's where, as you say, what's that value that, and it's perceived value, I guess, that's the beauty is in the eye of the beholder, value is in the eye of the beholder. I guess that's so important. I totally love that. And I think it's so important that we just take a moment, and I want my listeners just to take a pause and for a moment just reflect on that sort of chatter. You've articulated that so beautiful in terms of what is the conversation you're having with yourself? What is the fear? What is the limiting belief? What is the old story that's going on in your head, which is sort of preventing you from taking that next move, making that next move, dipping your toe in the water, taking the messy, imperfect action, as I call it. And so just for a moment, reflect on that, because, and I love how you encourage us to write it down, because then you get it out and you can see it and you can just ask with a simple question, but a better question. And the question that will move you forwards in the right direction. So that's great. Thanks, David. So you're a catalyst, a strategist, and a coach. And I know you work with organizations, but what does that look like? If you can give us sort of a practical example in terms of strategy shifting, what is the sort of like the essence of what you do with an organization?
Thank you. So it's typically an executive early in their tenure or transitioning to a new role. So a pivotal moment. They could sometimes be in role, but something's changing by dint of their role. And they've got to make an impact and pretty fast. And so sometimes the trigger point is a personal topic. It could be, I'm stepping into the limelight. I'm stepping into a boardroom. How do I show up? It could be an organizational question like, oh, this organization doesn't know where it's going. I need to develop a strategy fast. Or it could be a team question, which is, I've inherited a leadership team that's completely dysfunctional. How do I get it going and performing well? Where I really try and play is the intersection of all of those, the organizational, the team, and the individual. Now, many people would say, oh, I've only got an issue for myself or the team or the organization. Well, actually, if you start really digging into it, they're all interrelated. So one client, for example, said to me, I haven't got a great engagement with my chair, the organization and the board. That's where I want to focus. And we did. And then you dig down and think, well, actually, they probably don't know what your priorities are. The strategy of the organization is not clear. You're not performing in the key moments. And the team around you is showing up in different ways. So my role, I guess, is to bring some coherence to the challenges they're facing and then quickly get to some form of blueprint. The blueprint could be an emerging strategy, a culture of an organization, and then very, very importantly, this is what the love is, get to action. So tomorrow, in that meeting, in that conversation, in that board paper you need to write, what are you going to shift? And the great thing is you can actually, through a turn of phrase, an open mind, a good ear, change things very, very quickly. And then obviously at some stage where they need to scale that, I'll either bring in or they will bring in and I'll hand over to sort of consultants and others. But I guess I have a difficult relationship with the word coach. I have a coaching background, but I guess I have coached with content. So I don't get a nosebleed when they say, what do you think, David? You know, some coaches, literally fall over when they say, what's your perspective? Well, on the one hand, this, the one hand, that, or they facilitate a conversation. They want to know what your view is. Now, it doesn't mean I ram it down their neck. It doesn't mean that I tell them exactly what to do, but coach with content. And also, I'm not coming here with a, presumption that they need a big, big solution as some consultants do. My view is that with the right mindset, the right confidence instilled and the right capabilities, individuals and teams can do a huge amount of work themselves. They just need a little bit of a prod, an encouragement, an idea, a challenge. And that's where the combination of catalyst, strategist, coach comes in. At least that's the idea.
And if I just listen to you energetically, I can feel your passion and I can feel that subtle, this is really about, as you say, that little nudge, that little prompt, that little shift, which is so beautiful. And it's so amazing when, someone might see strategy shift, David is the founder and CEO of Strategy Shift. But now it makes so much more sense. It's so much more meaningful. And so thank you so much for bringing.
And I love that. Like, it's a gift. I mean, I mean this completely sincerely. It's a gift to work with great people of all different backgrounds. I have to be mindful of their time. So my framing is, what is the smallest shift or change that they can make to have the biggest impact? One, because it will probably, if it's small, it will probably happen. And secondly, the friction is probably less. And so I always start with the micro changes. Now, sometimes, of course, if you're going to shift the culture of the organization, that's not something you do overnight. But your opening ideas, framing moves are the ones that really set, I guess, the agenda for that change. And then changes, as you know very well from your own work, is a series of marginal changes over time with the right momentum, right mindset to do that, as opposed to what some people come into, which is, here is a massive change program. We're going to do this. It's going to take 3 years. And people either get fearful, bored, or turn off, or just don't engage. My thing is, how do I make it easy enough for people to actually do really, really good work?
Yes, I absolutely love that. And a lot of my work is centered around, you really want to get clear on the what and the why. And then you need to take that next best step with what you have right here, right
Yes.
now.
Yes, that's
And
absolutely
it
right.
can be a little baby step, but it's like if you take 365 little baby steps, that's going to move you forwards significantly in a year. So I'm also, you learn these lessons yourself. You're always,
Yeah, of course.
I always say the message is for me first, and so learning those lessons myself and. As you say, it's sometimes the smallest thing. For me, typically in my work, what I see is how, because you work with the physical, the emotional, the spiritual, and the mental aspects, the well-being, the holistic well-being. And it's often when people make a difference, make a change in one area, and it could be like they start doing exercise 20 minutes a day. It has this momentum and ripple effect in all the other areas as well. So that's what I love about your approach, where you're kind of
Yes,
connecting the
beautiful.
dots, between the organization, the individual, and the team, because that is like the one area in that one, change will make the ripple or create that ripple effect in the other areas as well.
Couldn't agree
So
more. That's
connecting the
brilliant.
dots. Yes.
And even if when you're connecting the dots, you do it through the process of work, as opposed to trying to create some very elaborate system
Yes.
that you talk
Yes.
through, because for many people it's overwhelming. If somebody
Yeah.
said to you, well, based on what you said, I think the way we're going to tackle it is to go through this journey with these factors, these dependencies, da 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 da. Not only would they get a bit bored, but also they think, wow. Firstly, it's a bit presumptive. I don't know exactly how we're going to change and what goes first and what the sequence is. But secondly, it just becomes overwhelming. So I think
Yeah.
we think in systems. The challenge is then how do you distill it into something that's really manageable that you can work on?
So I'm imagining then if you work with, let's say, a CEO, and it is that sort of simple approach, surely you must have had some pushback in terms of, how can it be this simple? Or if you recommend a step, there must be an extraordinary amount of trust, that, we don't necessarily need to know everything. We don't need to know the big picture. We can confidently take that step in that direction.
I absolutely agree. And so there's a degree of risk in the work
Yeah.
because you are either, actually in many cases, they find their way to that answer. You're framing it in a certain way, which is, okay, what
Yeah.
is the absolute number one most valuable step you can take forward? So they're doing the work, you're helping guide them, filter it, and prioritize.
Yeah.
And at the same
Yes.
time, I guess if you're really forensic about what's happening in their reality, what's really going on, what's the biggest challenge they're facing, and then also exploring what's to come, what should the organization, team, individual, what should you become, then actually they are clear about what's holding them back, clear about what they want to do next and become. And then, okay, so what are those moves? And
Yes.
then sometimes it becomes obvious. If it doesn't, then you rely on the fact that it's not just trust me, just do it. It's either
Yeah.
because of something like research I've done, some writing that they've read, or it's an analogy or an example I can give from somebody else to say. And actually, sometimes I connect people, where it's not too
Yeah.
confidential. I say, hey, let's have a chat. Let's have a three-way conversation with somebody else who's gone through something similar. And I hope overall there's an element of trust, and I don't always get it right, but
Yeah.
there's something about grounding it in the right reality, grounding it in a better future, and then really forensically say, okay, so there's lots of things. Where would you go? What's most valuable? What can you do next?
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And it's also that connection with other successful individuals, organizations is so valuable, so powerful. I think it's Tony Robbins that says success leaves clues, so really it's about getting advice from people who have been successful. You're not gonna ask for marriage advice from your divorced friend. So it's really about
Well,
where do you
you
have
never
those
know.
best maybe it depends on what it is you want, but I guess it's the principle of sharing in the successes and connecting people so that we
Yeah.
can um, collaborate. It's like I always, and I see this a lot in the security champions programs that we deliver, when we bring the champions in to the process early on, when we're creating the vision and we're co-creating the vision and we're collaborating with them, they feel like they have ownership, they've got skin in the game. And then you set it up, which I think is transitioning us nicely into the sort of team dynamics. And so I wanted to explore the team dynamics a little bit more with you around, you've got the individual leader, but, what does that look like in terms of creating a high performing team?
Well, that's a huge topic.
Big
I mean, a
question.
starting point would be, is it a team?
Yes.
Most leadership teams, most teams are not actually teams. They're a collection of individuals brought together to report performance, brag about what they're doing, and then represent a function. And so there's a merit in that. But actually,
Yes.
the starting point is, what are we here to do together? And why is it better to do it together rather than individually? And often some people in the chair or the leaders of those groups don't answer those simple questions. So what am I here to do? What are we here to do? What do I really expect? And if you ask the question, so what's our focus over the next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months? What impact as a team do we want to have? If a graduate or new apprentice walked into this leadership team and asked the direct questions that they often do, say they were shadowing the group or they opened it up to them, and some leadership teams do that, and said, okay, so great, I can see you're all senior people. What are you here to do? Many leadership teams would not be able to answer that. So clarity about what you're there for, the impact you want to have, the contribution of the team, and then you have to drill all the way down into how do you measure success of the team and incentivize people accordingly. For example, if an executive is on a leadership team, yet their performance is solely focused on their individual business unit or division's performance, then they'll show up, right? If they're cajoled, they'll probably be a good politician. But actually, will they contribute to the collective endeavor? Probably not. So you have to go from big picture stuff about focus all the way into incentives, and then could be a topic of another podcast, so I'll keep it brief, then run the interactions really smartly. What are the questions we want to be covering? What are the opportunities we want to focus on? What decisions should this group really make? Again, I don't know about you, if you're in a team that effectively is a talking shop that never ever makes a decision, it could be interesting. I call that a community of interest in many cases. But actually, there's no real skin in the game. You should be able to say, I was a contributor to, or I made a decision on something important to the organization, and I benefited from the ideas, the experience, the challenge of the people around me, and they had my back also when things went well or not so well. So those are some of the elements of what I think creates at least a team, and at least the elements of a higher performing one.
Yes, and I think that for me is, there's a very powerful model in Ali Stewart's Liberating Leadership curriculum, which is this sort of high challenge, high support model. And, it's having that high challenge and high support in equal and powerful combination, so the moment you have too much challenge and too little support, you tend to get toxic environments. So I think that's a really powerful model to really just, as a leader, and I think it must be the hardest thing to achieve, in terms of creating that support, but also ensuring that there is enough challenge as well.
And how do you have a real conversation? So often people don't show up, don't say anything. So actually, of a team of 10, two or three people dominate, and you've got 7 brains not being exercised and not expressing their perspectives. So what a waste! What a waste! So there's something about what does it take to create a real conversation, and that's about not only inviting the right people, get the composition right, making sure that they feel listened to in terms of shaping the body of work, and then being very clear up front about the type of conversation. So imagine if somebody at the beginning effectively ran through an agenda. Right, we've got 5 topics here. That's what we're going to cover. We've got 60 minutes. Right, let's go. I mean, it may be very efficient, may tick the boxes. The process may look very beautiful. But actually, it's theatre. It's meeting theatre, or it's leadership team theatre.
Yes.
It's a performance. And it will still have some form of impact. But imagine if somebody said, we've got one or two tricky questions to cover about the bureaucracy in the business, or how do we scale this particular opportunity. We've got brilliant brains in this room, lots of experience. I want to hear every single idea possible, and then we will reach a decision by the end of it. If that feels a bit uncomfortable at times, call it out. Let's have that openness. But I want to hear
Yes.
everyone's perspective. That took, by the way, about 30 seconds. Imagine if you had that framing. Most people, unless they're Machiavellian, would think, oh, this is important. I know where to focus my attention, and I'm ready to contribute. It just takes better framing.
Yeah, and that subtle shift again in terms of the way the leader frames it in the conversation. It's beautiful. Yes.
And then you have to stay there. So some people do the performance well at the beginning in introduction. And then they sort of, you can literally physically see it. They sort of, oh, I've done my bit, clap the hands, and then they're sort of done. But then you have to stay there, because it's how do you facilitate effectively? Draw out what people really think. Talk to, reach into people in terms of, okay, I think you've got there's something else that you may be wanting to ask. Encourage proper listening. That requires really being in the present, actually sometimes taking risks, and then not losing sight of the outcome. Often many leadership teams have great conversations, highly creative, very expansive, but they're literally just drifting into another topic. So having somebody who not only can facilitate that conversation, but also land on the outcome. Because again, I come back to talking to others. When you walk out that room, or if you come off the Zoom call or whatever it is, and somebody says, how was that exec meeting? The answer should be not only, oh, it was very good, excellent, great conversation, too. We've made a shift in our thinking, and we made a decision on X, and it's really important to the value of the organization. Like outcome based, not just experientially based.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And I can see how to hold that space in a team setting as a leader can, as you say, can be uncomfortable, can be risky. You've, of course, have to show up as your true, authentic self. And, I think it's like calling out that we've got to leave the egos, at the door. And I guess it's also potentially, showing that you can be vulnerable as a leader. In terms of, I don't have all the answers. We are figuring this out together. So, that's.
And I think that vulnerability is very hard to do skillfully. I see some leaders who express none, and that's not good, because people think that they either, they're robots or just overly arrogant. But also some leaders become overly vulnerable at a time where people do expect them to have some view, some perspective. So it either becomes, it undermines confidence in them, or something else. And so there's something about the vulnerability being, this is my initial thinking on it. I'm particularly keen to get perspectives on these particular points. So you give something of people to people to sort of warm up the conversation, but also you're not just there to ask the questions of others. Because ultimately, a lot of leadership teams spend a lot of time second guessing the opinion of the chair or of the CEO. Make it easy for them to contribute by sharing what you think and also what you don't know, both.
Yes. That's powerful. And actually, just this morning, how bizarre. I mean, I saw a little clip of, I think it was Jeff Bezos, who talked about why leaders should always speak last. I didn't necessarily listen to the detail and the context. It was just a very short clip about speaking last, listening to everybody's perspectives first before then.
And I think that can work in an established team, particularly. I think in a team where you're still building trust, I think it's important to signal your style. So you might say, of course, I have ideas and perspectives, but I'm keen to hear everyone's first, and then I'll reflect on what I heard and contribute. Otherwise, especially in a charged environment, low trust with some toxicity or an underperforming team, people might be thinking, God, this is a time for leadership. I don't want you to lean back. However, if you're in a business like Amazon, depending on the stage in the business, and obviously he left at a good time, they're motoring, and so he has probably the confidence and the trust in the team to think, okay,
Yes.
look, I know he's not short of ideas, but hey, good that he listens for once.
Yes, well, that's it. Yes. Listen. Very, very good. Okay, so I just want to shift for a moment to you, and we're talking about well-being, and the importance of staying resilient, and I mean, it's resilience in itself is such a loaded term. So I'm keen to sort of know what you see, like what's your view and experience of resilience? How do you explain that to people?
I think it's a mental and a physical thing combined. It's something about how do you take the shocks, the difficulties, and bounce forward. It's
Yeah.
not to say that you resilient for me doesn't mean that you can take anything and you literally are sort of Teflon, whether you're male or female. But there is something around how do you work through difficult situations? What's your toolkit? What's your mindset for doing that? And
Yes.
then how do
Yes.
you come out of it in a way that's at least your intent is to do something better? And so
Yeah.
in my case, resilience, there's been lots of challenges. There's always the professional ones of setbacks, whether they're real setbacks, i.e., you didn't get a job that I was going for, and I had a few of those. They're not public, but I was the candidate, and it didn't happen because, for example, of an acquisition where somebody else got the role. But frankly, that was more about my expectation that
Yes.
was damaged, as opposed to a real setback where you might have lost a job. To the personal
Mm.
ones, where when you're looking after a severely disabled child, and in my case, not having a night's sleep uninterrupted for virtually his whole life. And we're not going to do the other alternatives of which you could do, which is medicate and so on. That tests your resilience. So when I hear people
Mm.
say, "Oh, I'm really sleep deprived because I haven't had a good night's sleep in the last few days," now I say, "I'm sorry to hear that." I probably would have thought before. Well, I've done it for 12 years, and getting up 2 or 3 times a night for half an hour. Um, I didn't have a particular toolkit to manage. I just sort of just kept going. I guess
Mm.
over the last year, two or three things I've tried, if I may share them. Having gotten over my heavy skepticism about resilience work, and the skepticism was I'm fed up with reading so many blogs and articles of people saying, "Oh, you need to get up at 3 a.m." I mean, that's even earlier than you, Marilyse, but 3 a.m. in the morning, run a marathon, cook your dinner for the evening, da 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 da. And there are people who do that. They tend not to have children. They tend to have very understanding partners or no partners, and a life that they created. And most of them are self-absorbed and very
Mm.
selfish, right? And that could
Mm.
work for them. If, however, you have
Mm.
other people who are dependent on you, um, life is not as simple as that, or at least
Mm.
not as selfish as that. So two or three things I've tried. One is I've sort of got a grip on my diet. Now,
Yeah.
as you can see, I'm not badly out of shape, but I was not eating as well as I could. And when you're sleep deprived, you often eat a bit late, a bit too much sugar,
Yes.
and so forth. So literally, just I use the Noom app. I'm not a sponsor, but Noom, which is behaviorally based suggestions on how to understand your eating habits.
Beautiful.
Eating a
Yeah.
little bit less earlier, and so on, has not only reduced weight a bit, but actually just improved my relationship with, I guess, control. And to be clear, I wasn't
Mm.
gorging on 5 tubs of ice cream an evening, but that's made a big shift in my feeling, energy, and so on. So that's one aspect,
Beautiful.
diet. Um,
Yes. Yes.
I haven't, given home situation with my son, haven't been able to sort of go to the gym 5 days a week, but I made movement more critical in my
Yes.
day, even if it's number of steps, going for a run, and so on. That's like a foundation now. And then I've also just been very conscious, lastly, on uh, capturing and looking out for goodness, which sounds a bit woo woo. God, Lancefield, what have you
I
taken?
love woo
But
woo.
yeah, I mean, I capture gratitude every morning. It takes me a
Beautiful.
few
Yeah.
minutes. That gives me a jolt. It also reveals patterns of situations, issues, people that I want to do more of. And then also, as much as I can, spending time with people who have good intent and goodwill. Now, that doesn't mean I agree with them all the time, doesn't mean we don't argue from time to time, but people who care about the relationship beyond oh, David, can you give me this? Which I don't know about you. I mean, I get a lot of requests. It's great to hear from you. Great to see you. Can I have this? No relationship,
Yeah.
no real interest in me.
Yes.
Now, I'm
Yes.
not ruthless, but I'm being more intentional in spending time with people who care about me as a person,
Yeah.
and frankly, where we want to lift each other up. So those three things:
Exactly.
diet, movement, and I guess intentional positivity. Even though I struggle
Yeah.
to say that, and that feels a bit woo-woo, but forgive me, but it sort of works.
It does. It does. And I think it's important that, we really embrace that, because there is, and I've literally just read a book by the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. It's called The Book of Joy. And there's also a documentary about, they spend a week together. I think it was back in 2016, but where they've talked about joy for a week. And I mean, you've got these two biggest spiritual leaders in the world, both
Yeah.
Nobel Peace Prize winners, and, cackling literally like 8-year-olds most of the time. And I
Nice.
just
Lovely.
like
I'll have to
the
look that
joy, the
out.
positive. Yeah, you must, you must. So I love how you sort of presence with us. I use the acronym Daily Meds. So are you taking your daily meds, which is meditation, which your gratitude practice is? People think about meditation as like sitting as a Buddha, but it could literally be walking for 20 minutes, or, it doesn't have to be like in the spiritual sense. It can be incorporating your gratitude practice, all of that. So meditation, exercise, so the movement, the diet, and the sleep. So that is super beautiful. And by the way, for my listeners, I have actually created a rest and a release and a recharge guide, which I'll put a link in the podcast notes. So if you would love to download that, it describes the meds in more detail, then please do. It also talks about relationships, David. So I think your point around spending time with people that lift you up, we all have battery drainers in our life, people who really suck our energy. And I think it's really acknowledging that we should limit our time with those individuals, and then finding the people that really, really energize us and spending more time with them.
I
So
think the biggest
that's
revelation for me, which when I say it or come across as blindingly obvious, is that you've sort of got to do your own work on this. There are lots and lots of guides and sort of people who are amazing people who seem to live the perfect life. Firstly, that's the facade is often not the reality, which
yeah,
we
no,
often know but forget. You can get stimulus and encouragement and from them, but actually you have to do what works for you. So I know, for example, there are limits on how much I can improve sleep for the foreseeable future. Rather than beating
yes,
myself up about it, you just have to okay, that's it. That's all I can do for now. But what's in my control? My control is what I put in my mouth, or also
yes,
what I say. And so
yes,
sometimes using silence, not engaging in certain things, not responding, um, doesn't mean I become so in control that you become, annoying to be with. Those people who just are so clear on themselves that they find it people to engage with. But actually, I think we have more control of our mindsets and our bodies and our actions than we often think.
yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And it is that empowerment of self, and letting your inner roar speak, as I always say, because I mean, this is about, that inner conversation, and catching that inner conversation when it's negative self-talk. I've just watched Inside Out, the second Inside Out on the plane, and with all Riley's new emotions being introduced as a teenager, and I was just so like, wow. You forget that we've got all these different emotions going on. But yeah, such a beautiful movie. Um, so David, I'm gonna wrap us up. I can't believe the time always goes so quickly, and there are so many themes we've touched on today where we could have podcasts in their own right. There's so big themes where we've touched on. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. Just about to sort of close us out. advice to your younger self, what would you say to a younger David if you could be that younger David again?
Probably go faster, even
Okay.
if you make mistakes. Don't be held back. And I guess the other one would be, I come back to value. And value is not
Mm,
about money, but it's as much as you think about the work you're doing, an exercise, a project, an activity, an output, presentation, they're all important. You have to do those things.
mm,
Often it's easy to lose sight of the impact you want to have, the value you want to create from it. And by
mm.
having more of a focus on that, I think sometimes you can find shortcuts. You can cut out stuff that doesn't really matter. It's a sort of, in a 60-page deck, I mean, you and I have both produced long presentations, I'm sure, and reports in the past. You sort of think,
Yes.
what's the one page they really care about? So my
Yes.
younger self would be, yeah, do the good work, do what's required of you, but be laser focused on whether it's your client, your customer, your colleagues, stakeholders, what do they really care about, and focus more
Yeah.
there.
Beautiful. That is super. Thank you. And I think the go faster for me, I can really relate with that. And it's the taking messy, imperfect action and, not being afraid to fail because you never fail. You just learn, and it's about that experience and failing forward. So every
Yeah.
time
I
you
think we
have
do
an
fail. I mean,
experience, you
I'd be
learn.
challenging a moment. I think we do
Yeah.
fail sometimes. I mean,
Yeah.
I do, but it doesn't mean I fail as a person. It means I
Yes. I
failed
think
on
it's
an
that
activity
reframe. Yeah. Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
means that,
It's,
yeah, so you have a disappointment, something doesn't land, you don't win a client, you don't win so that's real, that is a definition of a failure. But it
yeah.
means that you go, okay, so what did I take from it? How do I do it better next time? And it doesn't mean that as a person, as an aggregate, I'm a lesser person. I think that's the distinction that about you when when you have big projects or big clients and something goes wrong. It's very easy to extrapolate to being,
Yes.
oh, the world is ended. And the reality
Yeah.
is, well, for that moment it feels like that, but tomorrow you'll get up, dust yourself off, and go again.
Yes. Yeah. That's great. No, I think that's super, and I think it's the distinction really is that it's not, you are not the failure. It's just the thing, and I think that's what's important to distinguish. Thank you so much, David. So if people want to find you, it's probably best to reach out to you on LinkedIn or email.
Sure.
Yeah. Would you mind just
Absolutely.
sharing your email with us?
Yeah, so it's david@davidlancefield.com. And also
That's
my work and platform is strategyshift.co.uk. And I'm reasonably
beautiful.
active on
Thank you.
LinkedIn, which I love. It's a great learning
Yeah.
platform.
Yeah, it is amazing. I agree. And David put out some amazing content, very, very, very powerful, insightful content. So please check him out. And yeah, it's such an honor, such a great conversation,
Likewise.
and really appreciate you taking the time today to join me, David. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. Thanks for the stimulus. I've taken away a lot too.
Always a student and a leader and a teacher. So everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. If you love the conversation, hit the subscribe button. We have some really powerful guests lined up for the rest of this year, and you don't want to miss a minute. If you want to get in touch with me, you can email me at marilise-de-villiers.com. We'll put it in the show notes. And in the meantime, live your authentic purpose, stand in your power, and have the courage to roar. Thanks, everybody.